Anger is real. It's in your organization. We have to be able to have these conversations and deal with it, right? With HR and everything, it's tough.
The message is super important. The message is not always guns, marks, gates, lock it down, you can't go here, you can't go there. The message is how do we work together to collectively secure everywhere, right?
We can actually make security also a service for employees. And one way that our team did that was provide additional training or tooling or other awareness so they can take that home.
When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ludlow, and enjoy today's episode.
2024, record number of presidential and prime ministerial elections across the world, right? If you're a Rogan watcher, you would know that almost every single incumbent was voted out across the world, which never happens. Incumbents always have the advantage. So what we learn from that is there's a complete, across the world, distrust in the status quo of power, institutions, which means there's a near distrust in the company that you work for, that you manage security for, right? So I'll let Josh out of it because I think he's sweating. I'm going to give this to you. How many of you, hands up, feel like there are topics you cannot discuss at work? I see a lot of smiles and heads go down, so those means hands up. So almost all of you, right? How are we going to have those discussions? Yes?
Why do you have to?
Excuse me?
Why do you have to?
Okay.
You know, it's dependent on the subject. Why doesn't it even have to be brought up? That's what I say to that.
Okay, why do you have to? Good question. So let's say we have an employee base who now sees each other as, basically strangers getting a paycheck at the same place, right? We have to realign them around the mission of the business, cultural values, like we have to bring them together. That's gonna cause some discussions that have to happen, right? And security, we're going to have to be leading those discussions. Josh.
Yeah. I think, number one, you meet people where they are, right? Security, back to mayors, not sheriffs, right? Especially the old guard. They approach them from a very, tough, single pane of glass, like it's this or my way or the highway type stuff. You got to meet people where they are. You got to understand where they're at, where we're at, right? In 2025, and all those things. And you got to be a mayor. You got to make it personable, right? Why does this matter to me, right? Why is this so important, right? So after this last Charlie Kirk shooting, and then even before that, we're in Tampa, Florida. So there was the shooting on the Florida State University campus where we had employees with kids on campus, right, during that time. So coming to Josh, are my kids safe? What do we do? And all those things. So you really have to be personable in those moments, and you have to build a trust, but you got to be a person. You can't be a robot, right? And so the message is super important. The message is not always guns, guards, gates, lock it down, you can't go here, you can't go there. The message is how do we work together to collectively secure everyone, right? And when those active shooter incidents happen, which seem to be back to back to back to back, as security professionals, we have to have those conversations. And in a new company, Circle's a startup-ish company, we've not had a lot of those conversations before, but I have to do it, right? So you have to pick the way that you approach it, especially if you're prompting it on the back end of a shooting. It can go really bad, really fast, right? So you have to approach it extremely soft. You start with the basic things, right? Situational awareness. We're all here to make sure each other makes it home safely. You can use these skills that I'm teaching you both inside the workplace and outside the workplace, right? And oh, by the way, let's just talk about some analytics, right? The FBI every year puts out the big active shooter report. Let's break it down to the numbers, because we've got a bunch of engineers in the company. They love numbers and graphs. Let's break it down that way, right? And then let's teach you some additional skills, right? How about like stop the bleed and stuff like that? And the way I approach it is I never say active shooter. I talk about active threats and I talk about emergencies, right? We teach the employee base to stop the bleed. It's not just if you get shot, stabbed, cut. It's also, you're pretty extreme mountain biker, and you get out there and go off the edge of a cliff, right? And you need to put a turning on, pressure manage, whatever. So I think the approach is everything. We cannot be robotic. We have to be personable, right? And we have to meet people where they are in their mindset currently.
I agree. And from now on, anybody that wants to jump in, just like elbow for a microphone and go ahead and jump in.
I would like just to add something on what you just said, collaboration. And that is something that we just miss. And that's why I mentioned that we have to, back to the basics. When the hunter-gatherers, right, back then, they create the civilization that we have today based on collaboration. And we are doing the opposite because we do not collaborate anymore. And we need to start, that's why, back to the basics. We need to collaborate and create that community and build that trust. And recognize you as a human, talk with your people, know them, be reachable, have that conversations. I just I received the best gift that I couldn't even receive. It was the attention for an executive, and he was with me, We were in that conversation. He was not in a hurry, as we most of the time do. Yeah, I call you later. Oh, yeah, hi, bye. Hey, I need you. Hey, call me. Right? So we need to create and build that trust, collaboration, and make people feel that they matter.
Love it. Yes, sir.
I have a question. So, as subject matter experts as well as our security field, right? So, you're talking about your organization specific. So, it's a two-part question that being said for a year. First part, do you feel that you have a responsibility to share your security and security knowledge outside your organization and social circles that, admittedly, that you've mentioned are largely uneducated? First part. Second part, as subject matter experts, how do you feel is an effective way to do that?
That's a good question. Who wants to take it?
I'll say something about this because this is really actually an interesting thing for me because I started my career in CIA. I was in the Navy for a long time, did a lot of work for defense and intelligence. I have noticed that a lot of my friends who are not in security think I know a lot of things that I do not know. I don't know if you guys have that experience too, but there is this kind of interesting dichotomy of, I do feel like there's helpful stuff that you can share. On the other hand, it's a little bit of a trap because I will have people asking me about some of the controversial topics I said this, mentioned, I don't like to talk about because I'm too terrified. But they will assume that we know things or that we have solutions to this problem or that we have inside baseball was probably going to happen. And I think as security professionals, one of the things that we can be very effective at is explaining how data and process actually guides these decisions, right? That it's not it's not because I'm actually carrying all the time, or I have secret knowledge because I work for CIA. It's none of that secret. But I do have a methodical way of looking at a problem. And I do have a methodical way to do forensics when something bad does happen, so I can pick apart how that bad thing happens. And guess what? You can probably do that too. If you take responsibility to call back to my growth thing, take responsibility for putting this stuff into your own practice so that you can take responsibility for security as an individual, even though you're not professional.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Can I share first? Yes. All right, cool. So Josh and I used to work at Facebook together. I'm going to share a story that kind of does answer your question. Last year, I was in New York at a bank doing an assessment, talking with the CEO of this bank. And, CEO's like, oh, security consultant. Awesome. Why am I meeting with you? Like in his head. You know, and then he comes in and he looks at me. He's like, oh, how long have you been at this? Which means you're probably not old enough to have anything valuable. And so I said, oh, a little while. And, you know, here's where I came from. I did this. And then, you know, talked about being at Facebook for about 10 years. And he said, oh, I have a story about Facebook. And I was like, oh man, I got locked out of his account. This is gonna stalk me forever. This is the worst. And he's like, look, a bunch of years ago, I got to meet with one of the executives there. I made my appointment, my meeting, like 6 months in advance. The day of, I flew into San Francisco. It was a beautiful sunny day. I drove down there. I walked into the building and I said, I'm here to see so-and-so. And they said, like, oh, yeah, well, so-and-so's not in this building anymore. They're like a mile over there. We moved buildings since you made this, but here's what we can do for you. Two options. One, we can put you in this video conference room and get you in your meeting on time. Or we can tell them that no fault of your own, you got to the wrong building. We'll put you in a security car and take you over there. You'll be about 9 minutes late. And he's like, wow, this is 6 months in the making. Like, I really want to have this meeting in person. Great. So reception, ping them, jump in the security car, drives them across the highway. They come in, the EA meets them. I was like, oh, you know what? It's actually good that there's a delay. He was very busy finishing something up, but now's the perfect time. He has this meeting. The meeting goes amazingly. And on the way out, he compliments this executive on how well trained and welcoming the reception staff is. And this executive says, awesome, I'll let security know, thank you so much. And he's like, no, not security. The receptionist. And he's like, well, they're all security. In fact, security is a primary culture bearer of what we do here at Facebook. Without them, they're the first people that anybody sees and the last people that says goodbye. And without security being infused within our culture and also then modeling the culture that we want our employees to reciprocate, we can't have this open, amazing culture.
Wow.
And so the CEO looks at me and says, do you know how they did that? And I said, actually, I developed the first training courses very early on of how to get security staff to engage in this manner. And that's something that we definitely programmed into all of the new officers that came, all of the security managers, the EP people, the global security technology people. Everybody knew that they bore the culture of that company. And I think that's why we have to have these conversations. I mean, when you're part of implementing the culture across such a diverse company, like how many awkward conversations you have to have?
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, the answer is a lot. But you know, your question was really about the community outside of work, right? Responsibility, your network, your social circle, things like that. Is that right? So I'll hit on that, and then I want to come back to this real quick. But I say, do we have an obligation to do so? Not necessarily an obligation, but I think approaches everything. Are we going to be expected to do so once they find out who we are and what we do? Yes. Should we take advantage of that? Yes, but approaches everything. Approaches everything. I'll give you a couple examples, right? So I was the president of the Homeowners Association, HOA group, and I would never, ever recommend that to anybody. The worst position I've ever held in my life, right? Oh my gosh. But we meet all the time. People figure out who you are, what you do, right? So they start to figure out who Josh is, what his background is, and then before you know it, every single meeting they're asking me, and these things are going on in the world, all around us, right? All the time. Josh, how can I prepare for this? Or Josh, how do you do this? What do you carry with you in your truck? Well, let me show you my little individual first aid kit and my stop the leak kit and all this cool stuff, right? So the approach is everything. You can't come out as a security guy and say, look at my gun, you want to hold it, you know what I mean, type of stuff. You just got to be super soft, right? So you'll find yourself in those situations. I say, don't hold back. There's nothing secret, right? We're not the CIA. We can divulge some of these things that can keep our neighbors and our friends safe. And I'll tell you another one that a really tough situation I found myself in was my son's daycare, right? So, excuse me, man, tough. punch the gut. They found out what I did, right? They say, hey, can you come teach us active shooter response? Ooh, buddy. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. But you suck it up, you get it done, right? And so you need to impart that knowledge on anybody that's willing to receive it, basically. That's what I'm saying.
I want to add to his question. I think that sometimes we need to break barriers as far as we talk about microaggressions. Our employees have microaggressions about us, right? They think guards, policies, everything. But we can actually make security also a service for employees. And one way that our team did that was provide additional training or tooling or other awareness so they can take that home. So we offer training so that employees can become certified in CPR Red Cross. We taught them how to do online safety tooling. So what is the kind of triggers that you should be looking for if you have young children online? We looked for other areas to show when they went to travel, for personal travel. Oh, by the way, did you know we have a travel program? You could also use that for personal travel and get some assessments. And then they took that on to share that with other employees. They shared it with their friends and family, and then they also kind of broke the barrier of what security is for the company.
Yeah, for sure. And like one of the big, and Tim knows this personally, one of the toughest inroads, especially if you're in and around executive protection, is the family, right? Because you're preparing for the event, you're preparing for the executive, and you've got your trip all down pat, you got your security package, but you don't know what the family's doing, where they're going, where the hell even are they, right? So if you can impart that knowledge, find those opportunities to impart that knowledge to the family, that's a big win, right? So you're not necessarily 100% responsible for them in some cases, right? Especially smaller groups, smaller companies like mine. But you win them over, you're solid. So like a perfect example of that is the Bataclan attacks in 2014, the Paris attacks, 2014, 2015, right? Everything's going on, what's happening, and oh, by the way, we have this board member's family that's supposed to go to Paris tomorrow, and they're going regardless. So, Josh, help. Instead of the chairman of the board for Walmart, you know what I mean? It wasn't like, oh, sorry, I'm good. I don't have responsibility for them. They're not within my purview, right? But you bring out that skill set, you put those tools out there, and you lay it out for them. How can they stay as safe as possible in that environment, which they can't fully control, which is absolutely nuts right now, and you will win them over. And when you win them over, that's only going to help your case in one of your executives.
And that's spreading culture, right? You're helping them understand the role security could play in their life, right? Yep. So open it up for questions. Anybody who has questions, anybody want to have a discussion? Go ahead.
I would relate to anger. You mentioned it during the...
Let me get you a microphone.
Thank you. So I will ask about anger. So typically when we're doing investigations and we realize about an incident that happens, you can see that a common ground or a very normal situation or driver that bring that people or that employee to do something that is not right is because I was angry. So in your experience, how you address that in order to identify those cases, how you identify the potential incidents that could be affecting the other employees in the company by identifying the case of potential anger inside.
One of the things that I spent a lot of time on when I was doing work with the Army was inside the threat. And then when I launched my first company, Threat Coach, which is what became part of Simon Solutions, I mean, that was really the driver, was how do you conduct proper insider threat analysis. And what I learned, and in fact, my last guest, Patricia Stokes, who ran Army Security through Fort Hood and the Navy Yard shootings, which were both perpetrated by insiders, is that it's anger, but it's way more multifaceted in most cases. And really mature insider threat programs, I think, have to be able to detect a lot of precursor behaviors and patterns about individuals who make high risk if you wait until you attack in anger, you're probably way too late. Like, there are a lot of things that can cause people to radicalize. It could be strange travel. I mean, I have to go to sort of the national security perspective on this, which is a little bit different with different privacy considerations. But travel patterns, things like financial condition, bankruptcies, home life, these are all factors that can contribute to an individual that otherwise something they are mad, I mean, angry in that one situation might not affect, I mean, it might not matter. It was just the last moment. So that's the takeaway that I took from spending time on the insider threat problems. And it's very complex and it has to be a very long-term collection of problems.
I was going to say, so that becomes compounded when we're in the current people risk environment where everybody's upset, nobody's satisfied, everybody's complaining about all sorts of different things. It used to be you could go to HR and be like, hey, what are the big complaints right now? Like, what are the trends that you're seeing? But everything is out of place. And so how do you address these feelings that people that may not come to the office? One of the big impacts of the United Healthcare shooting was not the unfortunate assassination of that executive, although tragic. It's that the support for Luigi. And as these companies looked across social media and they realized how many of their employees were ultra supportive of this. The same with Charlie Kirk, the same with a lot of the synagogue things that we've been seeing, church things that we've been seeing. And so anger is real. It's in your organization. We have to be able to have these conversations and deal with it, right? With HR and everything, it's tough.
Absolutely, and you just put like a good stuff on the table, and you just mentioned HR. And honestly, every single organization needs to take a look on HR because they don't work with us. Sometimes it's against us, and they just fulfill some applications and so on, and backfill some positions, and it's beyond that. We need as security or risk practitioners to work with HR. Because at the end, it's people that you are inviting to your home. And the anger is not overnight. There is a pattern and that you have to identify, but because you are in your daily basis very occupied with other things, you do not realize that probably some misbehaviors or people start with low performance is like probably the normal. And those are seriously some like alerts that the person is sending you that is something just going wrong. And we need like strength, HR, and security, risk. Everybody needs to work with them to work together as a team and identify those behaviors. Yeah, sure.
And one more thought on that too, and I'm sure many of you know this is a very morally-leading problem. Because we're now affecting insider threat operation in a company. And there are some companies that build very well, like Lockheed's very excellent, because I haven't even really got that one. But the hoops that they had to jump through to get that thing stood up, and to get the permissions internally and for their employees to collect the kind of data that they really need to identify high-risk employees was a moving on the mountain. I mean, it's really hard. And that's with some of the national security projections that they already have. If you're not in that space, getting this right is going to be really hard. It's going to require getting consent from employees out of the gate to monitor some of their behavior in a way that they might not like. But it might be the only way to collectively fail, especially in the arts organization, on a lot of disbursement.
Absolutely. Time for one more audience question, and then we'll break, and obviously we're available. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question listening to all of this. We come up by days away. There was our Miki, emotional intelligence, and how much of that I'm just curious as clients, how am I to know they're peaking full? How many get ever done emotional intelligence?
How many have redone it since COVID? We've come out of COVID changed.
Yes. And I just share that because to me, culturally, what we really want to shift to, I see that so integrated que ça c'est surtout. Parle po boy chique. how many of us have talked through so many different assessments, our personality scores, but we're never tested for our EQ, right? Our emotional intelligence, because the emotions are high, right? But what do we do with those? And if they hit that high, it alters our gray fat state, and we actually crazy good. If I start our crazier, it has to triggers. But to me, that is something that obviously the parents done their EQ. So that's something that's not being taught.
You know, and you have such a good point there. And I'll bring that back to being a function of leadership. If you are leading people and teams, that's on you. That's on you to have those conversations. Distributed employees that you don't see, like, what type of engagement programs can you have? Like, hey, we're self-assessing to see like how we can better serve everybody in their different environments and all these different things. And I'll close with this before we get back to the networking. Is anybody here old enough to remember like going postal, like when it was literally a thing in the 90s?
Yeah.
Right, so that was the end of like the assassination trend in the 90s, right? Essentially, postal workers were going to the post offices and murdering their bosses and some of their employees. Does anybody know how they fixed it? They instituted IO psychology-based leadership training. And they fixed their shitty management. And that's how we're going to fix this people risk problem. And it all starts with you.